So welcome once again. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are. My name is Robert Bell. I am the Executive Director of the World Teleport Association, which is hosting this webinar today, and we appreciate very much your joining us. If you're not intimately familiar with us, WTA is a trade association. It's a nonprofit organization, been around since 1985, and it exists for two purposes. One is to advocate for the interests of teleport operators around the world, and also to promote excellence in their operations, technology, and business practices. And so we do those things through a number of means. Some of them are on your screen. We do a good deal of research and reporting in which we either look at issues of concern to teleport operators, either technically or commercially, or also we gather their best practices as they report them to us and share them among our membership. So we do that through things like the best practices and teleport valuation report that you see, and so forth. We consist of about 140 companies, teleport operators, satellite carriers, technology providers in some 46 nations. There's about 1,000 people in our network at any given time. And that network is a really vital channel for, market channel for satellite and fiber carriers. We did some research about 8 years ago and demonstrated that about 27% of global revenues for the satellite transmission business end up going through the accounts of teleport operators. They're also big buyers of technology. Again, some research shows that we tend to think about, in the technology business, we often think about selling to broadcasters, for instance. The typical teleport operator is spending about 5 times more in any given year than a broadcast organization, just because they have such ongoing demands. So on your screen is a list of some of our representative members. They are independent teleport operators around the world, as well as the leading carriers and major regional carriers in the satellite space, and some of them the best known technology names in the business. We're very honored to have their ongoing support and participation. So on to our webinar itself, just some housekeeping notes for you. First of all, right for now, all attendees except the speaker will be in listen-only mode to give us a good experience. If you have a question, and we certainly hope you do, I'd like you to submit those using the questions panel, which will be in your little screen, your little GoToWebinar control panel. There's a questions tab. If you put it in there, it will come up on my desktop, and I'll be able to get you into the conversation. After the webinar, this webinar is being recorded, and afterwards the recording will be made available to all attendees as well as the presentation itself. And finally, if you are in need of technical support, we have a couple of numbers on the screen. You might jot down the one that is relevant to your location, whether you're in the U.S., where you can use the toll-free, or outside of it. So today's agenda, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about our teleport certification program so that we all have a common understanding of the basics. And then it'll be my pleasure to introduce you to today's panelists. They are Jesus Mendez-Sampredo, who is the third-party teleport operations manager at Eutelsat, located at the Rambouillet Teleport, and Angus Blackwood, Managing Director of Hawk CX, and who is also, I think at this point, our most experienced WTA auditor. And again, we're very pleased to have him with us. And then I'll have a chance to ask some questions of them and to bring your own questions into the discussion. So, teleport certification. This is about a 2.5-year-old project, which was originally suggested to us by an executive at a major satellite operator who, in a conversation with me, said, you know, we have an interesting problem. We are doing business with more and more teleport operators in other new parts of the world. And each time we do so, it involves a pretty significant investment on our part of time and resource to validate that this is an operator that we want to have connect to our network, and in the best of all possible worlds, to actually be a partner of ours, to be a channel to market for us, as well as for us to be a channel to market for that operator. And he said, simple question, is there anything that the World Teleport Association can do to help? Well, I was very pleased immediately, without much thought, to say, I'm sure there is. And what resulted is this teleport certification program. It's the first objective and transparent and increasingly internationally accepted method for teleport operators to document the quality of their operations for both customers and strategic operators like the satellite operator I mentioned. And for customers to select teleport vendors that deliver the price performance level that they need for their particular applications. And so they can decide that they need a teleport capable of supporting a mission-critical live global sporting event, let's say, or a teleport operator capable of supporting a internet trunking into a developing nation where the quality of service constraints are not so severe. And the price obviously should vary for those two things. When I described the program as being transparent, it's based upon a set of standards, open standards, that were developed by a WTA member operations and technology executive committee. And it focuses on two things. First of all, on facilities, and it's all the aspects of facilities. So it's all the things that go into business continuity, power, and so forth. It is the transmission chains, it's the operating environment, meaning where the teleport is located and the kind of conditions it has to operate under. Terrestrial connectivity, again, facility-based, satellite antennas, health and safety facilities and systems, security facilities and systems, the network operations center, and all the things that go along with it. And finally, as minor and yet important a matter as storage and spares. So that's one side of it, that's the physical side of it. The other side, of course, are the people, are the procedures that we use to run the facility. So we look at procedures for managing the capacity, procedures for maintaining service continuity, not just do you have the equipment, but do you have the procedures in place to use that equipment properly. Procedures for information security and physical security. Vitally important procedures for change management. It is, of course, when we change something that we face the greatest risk of something going wrong afterwards. Configuration management to ensure that we know what is going on in our facility at all time. And finally, our ongoing measurement of service availability and the performance process and how we constantly improve that. So, very long list, nearly 200 questions in the questionnaire that we ask our certificatees to fill out. And that leads me to the certification process. It consists of two stages, provisional and full. And in the provisional stage, we provide a very detailed questionnaire to the teleport operator. And that teleport operator spends a good deal of time filling it out. We're going to hear more about that in just a moment. And returning that to us. We run it into our analytic tool and come out with a score that says, yes, you are a provisionally certified teleport. And we will post that as a provisional certification, noting that it is based on self-assessment. Most teleport operators then choose to go to the next stage, which is to request full certification based on an audit, a visit from an auditor, like Angus Blackwood, to come in and actually validate what's in that questionnaire, as well as to look for aspects of the operation that are important but perhaps not reflected in the questionnaire. And those may be some terrific new facilities or procedures that were not adequately reflected in that questionnaire. And that may cause the auditor to say, if based on the questionnaire that teleport is rated at one level of our program, perhaps they get a higher rating. And in addition to that, one of the values that I think increasingly we're hearing about from our teleport operators is there's also recommendations in that report for what to do next. Where are the places that you can invest time or money or both to improve the aspects of your operation? And so that ends up being a very valuable product. But for the simplest basis, what comes out of that full certification is a published rating for that facility from Tier 1, our highest level, through Tier 1, our lowest level. That remains in effect for 3 years, after which the teleport operator is required to renew that certification based upon a repeat audit. So it's very much like other certification programs. We model it, of course, on the ones that are most successful. And in that, we provide coordination of that standards development as well as its updating. We're actually going through an update process right now. We, of course, run the program. We recruit and manage the auditors and coordinate what they do. And we also maintain the certification database, and that's really the go-to spot online where any teleport operator can say, here's my certification. It's been issued by WTA, and I can prove to you that it's in good standing. To date, we have certified 19 teleports in all the regions of the world. These are different levels. The ones with the red asterisks are full certifications. Some of the ones here which don't have an asterisk by them today will have one by them in the future because they're also planning to move up to full certification. And we have an additional 15 teleports in progress, meaning that they're working on that massive questionnaire, and we'll look forward to moving them through this. So we've been very gratified by the response. This program's about 1.5 years old in terms of being in the market, and it's receiving some good grades and some excellent feedback from both the teleports being certified as well as our auditors are doing a great job at making this program better every month. In fact, we believe finally that we're, as in any certification program, we're reaching that critical mass where increasingly customers who are looking for a teleport are asking the question, is your teleport certified? Can you please show us your certification? And of course, that's the end result, the end reason for doing almost all of this. So that's enough about an overview of the program. What I'm interested in doing is having a conversation with the people who know a great deal more about it than I do. And they are Jesus Mendez-Sempredo, whom I already mentioned. He's with Eutelsat. He's a third-party teleport operations manager. He's located at the beautiful Rambouillet teleport, and Angus Blackwood. So we're going to start out by speaking with Jesus and talking a little bit about the audit of the Rambouillet teleport from his point of view, and then we'll be turning to Angus and also looking for your own questions. So, Jesus, have you been brought up live here?
Yeah, hello, Robert. Thank you for this opportunity today to share our experience with the certification.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we passed the first technical hurdle. We have audio. Let's talk about the certification of the Rambouillet teleport, which we might as well tell everybody right now if they don't know. You were certified as our first Tier 4 teleport, top marks throughout. So could you tell us a little bit about your responsibilities at Eutelsat and sort of your professional background so we can understand better the other comments you're going to be making?
Sure. Well, as you already mentioned, I work as responsible for third-party teleports in Eutelsat, working specifically in the teleport of Rambouillet and managing the life cycle of services involving third-party teleports. As professional background, I could mention that I have been working now for more than 10 years as system and network engineer in service operations, specifically working with telecom carriers, and I have also some experience implementing playout systems. So, in relation with the teleports, having worked with Eutelsat deploying video solutions and payload monitoring infrastructures for several teleports around the world, allowed me to make this step into the coordination of the teleport activities, and this is where I am today, managing and coordinating the activities of more than 40 stations with permanent services for Eutelsat, and working with several projects with a group of around 75 teleport operators currently participating in our Eutelsat Global Connectivity Network that, as you may know, is our partnership initiative for teleports, collaborating with Eutelsat.
Sure, and that's actually a great example of the kind of thing I talked about earlier, that you, as you partner with teleports, I know you put a great deal of effort into making sure that they are the kind of partners that Eutelsat needs, and anything that we can do to help with that is our pleasure. Could you talk a little bit about why Eutelsat, as primarily a satellite operator, chose to pursue certification of the Rambouillet teleport?
Yes, Eutelsat has always been quite committed to the highest quality standards, and in one way, the best commitment to show the quality to our customers is going through the most relevant certifications in the market. For example, we have worked already with the ISO standards and other quality and security certifications. So the point is that being an active member of the WTA, let's say that Eutelsat has understood the value of this initiative and the value that the initiative could bring to the teleport industry. And also we understood that it would be a good opportunity to show to our customers this quality commitment I was talking about, and to go through the process and to show to the customers that we can commit in these highest criteria of the WTA. So I could say that before the initiative of WTA, there were several certifications I mentioned already. Sorry, the ISO certifications, but most of them they're focused on quality, but in a general way, and no one of them were adapted to the specific perimeter of a teleport. So with this certification, we saw we could help to establish an international standard for the teleport activities, and it could be very useful for our own purpose because identifying good teleports to provide quality service is always a quite complex task, and it may take a lot of time and resources. For example, every time we need to select a teleport, we need to establish discussions, we need to make a surveys, site surveys, we need sometimes just to establish a trust relation with teleports that maybe they are too remote to make a quick site survey. So I think that this certification presents a perfect opportunity to have, in a formal way, a picture of a quality of a teleport. So for these reasons, we accepted to go through the certifications, meaning that we would like to show to our customers that indeed we were committed with this quality standards.
Okay. Thank you. Now, the certification, as you noted, this is very specific to teleports. That means that certification questionnaire is very long and detailed. I know because I was involved in helping to develop it. So, how at your end did you organize the effort to complete it? Who needed to be involved in your organization? And if you have an estimate about how many person hours did it take really to get through that first step?
Yeah, well, it's a difficult question to estimate with a precise number, mostly because we didn't work on that in a full time. But what we did here, it was to select a person to coordinate all the activity. In this case, was myself, to centralize and organize all the resources we need to fulfill the form. So I would say that the first step of the certification took us around 3 weeks, I would say. But remarking that we were not doing it in full time, so it could be quicker. In terms of organization of the task, what we have done is to divide the questionnaire in different parts. For example, we took the questionnaire and we separate RF from connectivity, from DBB. Well, as you mentioned already, this certification goes through all aspects of the operations of the teleports. So we separate each of the areas, and we had individual meetings with each area managers in the teleport related to each activity. In that way, we could have experts on each area providing the most realistic answers, because we wanted to be quite conservative in that. So these meetings helped me also to acquire an overview, a good view of all the activities, and to prepare myself also for the on-site audit. From there, what we did is to validate the final version with our management. We engaged for this process our quality manager, Paulo Rossi, and also our service operations director, Jose Sanchez. And after reviewing this document, we have also triggered some activities to improve in those areas that we consider the weakest. Okay, so once we finish all this process, and once we get the feedback from the WTA, we schedule the audit. So in terms of timing, I think I would say that the complete process, getting the provisional certificate and scheduling the audit, is around one month and a half, I would say.
Okay, very, very interesting. And so you actually, in the process of you did a bit of a self-audit while gathering this information and discovered things that needed to be improved. It's very interesting.
Indeed, yeah. It was a good way to prepare for the audit for the second part.
Right. So then, what additional preparations, if any, were required to actually, be ready to have the on-site auditor come to Rambouillet?
Well, the audit process was quite intense, in fact, mostly because given the size of our teleport, we agreed with the auditor and with the WTA to proceed with an audit during around 2 full days, because we wanted to be sure that all working areas were correctly audited. So, well, I need to say that I think for us it was 2 days, but I think there are other smaller teleports that can do this audit in a full day. But in any case, it's very intensive because you need to review all your activity. Okay, so what we did to prepare the audit is more or less to follow the same procedure we use for the first part of the certification, scheduling some kind of review of each area individually and engaging in this process each area manager one by one, just mostly to avoid taking the time of the people and just making them focus on their real activity. Okay, this segmentation would it simplify quite a lot the process, and also it reduced the requirements in terms of availability of the people. So as I already mentioned, we divide our activities in network and connectivity because they are very related, DBB, including, for example, video activities and modulation and this part of activities. After we focus also in infrastructure, and in this part of infrastructure, we include all the power infrastructure of our site and all the technical facilities. We went through RF, and after we focus quite a lot in procedures. And for the procedures, we segment the activities in 3 parts, and it was support and monitoring, where we review the activities of our CSE and our NOC. Quality procedures that were something very transversal because quality is around all the activities, and of course security. So for all these areas during the audit, we had the opportunity to inspect not only the physical infrastructure, of course, but as I mentioned already, to spend quite a lot of time reviewing the procedures, because as you mentioned in the previous slide, procedures is something very, very important. So talking about these procedures, in our case, we had already a lot of documentation in our quality management system, so the process was much easier, because I could understand that for a teleport, for example, a teleport not having ISO certifications, the part of the procedures could be a real challenge, in fact, because there are a lot of things that the auditor wants to see, because you need to demonstrate that all your replies are according to the reality. So you need to have specific procedures showing how you are managing your activities and so on. So, well, in any case, I think that the target was quite fulfilled, and I think that the process was successful, given our accreditation for Tier 4, in fact.
Thank you, Jesus. That was I really appreciated that. It was very thorough, and I think there's a good takeaway here, which is you used the structure of the certification program to organize that on-site audit. You grouped some things conveniently, but that way you were able to use your staff effectively during those 2 days, not everyone sitting around in a meeting for 2 days, and get the greatest value. So I think that's a real model for other people to take away. In addition to the Tier 4 ranking, which is of course fantastic, and congratulations again on that, what other insights or recommendations did the audit report give you that might be useful?
Yeah, I would say that the full process, and not only the audit, was very beneficial for our operations, meaning that it was a good opportunity to review the status of all our infrastructure and to confirm that all the procedures were correctly in place according to our quality management system. In general terms, on each activity, there was always possible improvements, of course. But we took the advantage of the feedback from the audit to study some of these opportunities for improvement. So after receiving the final score, we study the results and we evaluate the cost of the WTA proposals in terms of our weakest points. In addition of this review meeting, let's say, that we did after getting the final qualification, we took advantage to integrate new procedures in in our quality system for minor activities that we consider that we saw during the audit that we were missing some parts for describing minor activities. So we decided to include this documentation in our quality system. In general terms, the process was very interesting because it was a perfect opportunity to review the status of the infrastructures and all the activities associated to our operations. I would say that for me, that I'm managing teleports, it has been a very, very, very good opportunity because personally, I do not have time to review all the different activities that our teleport is performing. So I appreciate very much the opportunity.
Yeah, there's that old saying that the cobblers, the shoemaker's children are always the ones without shoes. And that certainly applies to everything we do. A couple of questions from our audience. First of all, one is a specific one for you, which is which ISO standard certificates do you have in addition to the WTA certification there at Rambouillet?
Yeah, currently we are certified specifically. I do not know Eutelsat as big company, but just related to our teleport, we are holding ISO 9001 and ISO 27001. That is quality and security. And to be honest, to be involved on the ISO certifications, it helped a lot to prepare the W certification as well, because there are a lot of procedures that need to be created and elaborated, so it helped quite a lot, yeah.
Good. Well, that's good, because there was a follow-up question here, which was, would you recommend going through the ISO process before applying for WTA certification? The ISO process, of course, is much, much more difficult and long-standing, but you're saying, you seem to suggest that there's some value there.
Yeah, of course I would recommend that, but it is not something mandatory, meaning that the WTA certification is something very specific to teleport operations. So even one teleport not holding this kind of ISO certifications can go perfectly, but maybe they will need to dedicate more time in terms of procedures, because as you mentioned, the questionnaire of the first stage of the certification is very extensive, and there are a lot of things that the auditor can see during the audit, but there are a lot of things that you need to demonstrate, like procedures of support, procedures. In general terms, everything must be documented. So, well, a good start point, of course, would be the ISO. But I wouldn't say, I would encourage any teleport not having ISO to go through WTA certification as well. I think it's a very, very good exercise.
Yeah, well, thank you, because I frankly don't want people to wait 2 years for their ISO certification before they come
Sure,
try it
yeah.
out. Let us bring Angus into this conversation, if we might. Jesus, thank you. That was really valuable. We're going to I have some more questions coming in from our audience, but I think there are good questions for the two of you to address. So I'm going to put that off. And first, Angus, presuming that you're with us, did we have audio from you?
Yes, we have.
Super. Okay. So could you very briefly just introduce your company and your professional background so that people understand who they're dealing with here?
Yeah, thank you, Robert, and thank you very much for the opportunity to come on the webinar. So my company is HawkCX, and we help teleport operators improve their services that they provide to their customers. Our core area of expertise is really in identifying operational issues and developing service improvement plans. So we're really right in the core of this webinar. So apart from that, we also provide support with training, process improvement, product development, supply management, and those kind of things that would go together to improve teleport's performance. In terms of my overall, my professional background, I've been in the satellite industry for over 30 years, working with various organizations, including Airbus, European Space Agency, and laterally with Arqiva, where I was running the teleports that they've got for 15 years. We started off there with 2 teleports back in the early 2000s, and had 10 international teleports at the peak. So I had got a lot of experience there running various teleports in different shapes and sizes. So this really, what I've found over the years and what I'm finding doing the auditing is there is no such thing as a standard teleport. Yes, of course, the overall functionality of teleports is common, and obviously they do a similar job. However, they all have different history, build standards, local operating conditions, different people, local processes, etc. So I think that the thing that I'm bringing to this role is really the experience of understanding those differences and being able to apply them to the quite complex audit or questionnaire with over 200 questions. But I do find it very rewarding because the audit is the starting point for improvement, and that's how I use auditing in my business. It's absolutely, as Jesus has said, it's the starting point to understand where you can improve, and improvement is a continuous process. So that's why I enjoy this. That's why I enjoy this work so much.
So would it be fair to say that there are standards of performance that need to be met, but there's no standard way in which teleports achieve it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's obviously standard building blocks of infrastructure and transmission chains and all the standard kind of infrastructure that you'd expect to see at a teleport. But I think the way that teleports are run in general, there's different operating conditions, different countries, different regulations, different local standards. So really, I think the questionnaire takes care of that because it's sufficiently detailed across all the areas to be able to pull out those differences. But yeah, absolutely, there's no such thing as a standard teleport.
So from your position as now, I went over the high points, if you will, of what's in the certification. But from your position as an auditor, could you sort of give us your view of what that questionnaire, and you just recently did a complete review of that questionnaire for us, which we appreciate. It's part of the upgrade. Could you just give us a high level of what you think that questionnaire covers, sort of what its purpose is, and why it covers the specific things it covers?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you said, the questionnaire consists of 200 questions, and it really goes into a lot of detail across all the key areas. So I would call it a sort of balanced scorecard of a teleport in its overall capability and performance. So just looking at the individual areas really in a bit more detail. So in terms of overall teleport capabilities, so the sort of visibility of the geostationary arc and the frequency clearance and the geographic diverse backup facilities, those sort of things, these are things that are really important to customers. So customers want to understand where they're putting their services and whether they are getting what they're paying for, if you like, in terms of the flexibility and the technical expertise. And I think that sort of customer perspective is quite a useful one to take, and I think Hisa has mentioned it as well throughout the questionnaire. So if I'm a customer coming into a teleport, I'm looking for these aspects to give me the confidence in the teleport and the operation. So looking at the infrastructure, a customer would come into a teleport and look and see what sort of electrical distribution there is, what sort of backup generators they've got, what sort of cooling there's in place, whether there's fire suppression as well as detection, what sort of security, what sort of fiber connectivity. So all these areas are really important to customers to understand the overall kind of offering that a particular teleport can provide. And then moving on to the RF side and the transmission chain capability and robustness of the design and build, again, that's core to what customers are buying as a service. So really they're looking for that a good standard of build and a good standard of maintenance for these areas. And then onto network operations and staffing and the monitoring and control tools that the master control rooms and network operation centers use. So customers are really, really keen to see that their services are proactively managed and they are their services are going to be safe, they're going to have high availability, and the people that are looking after their services, they care about the services, and they've got the necessary tools and processes in place to manage them. And then there's also the sort of more hygiene levels of sort of sparing. So what sparing do teleports carry? What's their approach to health and safety? Have they got attention to detail around health and safety? And then there's the information security aspect, which is a whole subject in its own right, which obviously customers these days are extremely concerned about. So really all the areas, including the processes and procedures. You mentioned earlier change management, incident management, configuration management, all these areas. Again, customers would ask questions about these to see if the teleport management systems, processes, if they're what they would expect them to be, so that can they entrust their services with them for 1 year, for 3 years, for even for 5 years? Can they trust that teleport to deliver their precious services for their customers? So I think that's where the questionnaire is coming from. It's really taking a perspective of a balanced scorecard. What's the overall capability and expertise of the teleport from a customer perspective?
Thank you. I just want to, for those listening, thank you so much for your questions. We're going to be working these in, so don't worry if you haven't heard an answer to your question yet. We'll be getting to it, and I really appreciate that. Thinking about now, so you get an assignment from WTA to do an audit, and you get in touch with the teleport operator. What do you tell them to prepare? How do you tell them to prepare for your visit?
Yeah, well, it was very interesting listening to Jesus and hearing the process they went through to prepare, and I would absolutely agree that it's a really good opportunity to do a self-audit. So doing a self-audit before you even do the questionnaire, to understand where the areas, where the gaps are, the areas for improvement are, the gaps are, etc., and also where you're doing really well. So when I'm assigned to audit a teleport, the first thing I do is I obviously make contact, and then I ask for some information just to make my introduction to the teleport easier. I do know quite a lot of the teleports out there, but actually not to a sufficient level. So I need the information from the teleports themselves, and that information might include electrical schematics, showing the sort of the grid connectivity, the generators and the UPS arrangements, and that kind of thing. And I would look for other information like the layout of the technical facilities, including the plant, the antennas, rack areas, just to get some familiarization before I actually do the visit, which is going to cut down on the actual visit time. I would look for, I would look for the terrestrial connectivity routing diagram, so I can understand what terrestrial connectivity there's in place and capacities of that, and which suppliers, which carriers the teleport's using. And then I'd also look for maybe some schematics around typical transmission chains, so I can understand what a typical transmission chain would look like, showing baseband and RF equipment and backup switching and that kind of thing. Again, just to get a good flavor before I actually arrive at the teleport, so I can prepare and kind of understand what sort of standard that the teleport is operating at. And then I would also, excuse me, I would also look for copies of key processes. So again, he's just talked a little bit about the processes and how important they are. They are absolutely important. They're the glue between the equipment and the people. So if they aren't right, then you're probably going to have problems. So I'd look for copies of processes just to see what level the teleport is operating at from a process, from a procedure perspective. And then also, finally, I would look for maybe some performance metrics from the teleport, showing maybe what service levels have been achieved over the last 12 months, maybe a summary of some of the outages that they've had, just to get a flavor of the kind of challenges that every teleport has, but just to get a flavor of what type of challenges they're having. So that information pack is really useful to get right up front, and then I can spend less time actually at the teleport. It would still going to be at least 1 day, and it could be as much as 2 days, as Jesus mentioned. So that pack up front is very important. I think the other area for preparation is for the teleport operator making sure that they've got the right people on site for the meeting. So again, Jesus mentioned that having the right people in the room at the right time, that is really, really helpful for an auditor to be able to ask the right person the right questions, if you like. So I think finally I would make sure that as a teleport operator, that my facility is in a good state, not only doing a pre-audit, but actually making sure that it's tidy on the day of the visit, and you've packed away those cables and everything's looking tidy in the rack areas. There's nothing worse than walking into a rack area and it's a bit messy and you're a bit embarrassed by it. So That's quite easy to do, but sometimes it is missed. So those are the areas that I would recommend for preparation for an on-site audit. Robert.
Very good, thank you. I'd actually like to bring, I have more questions for you, but I also have a lot of questions from our listeners, so I want to bring those in. I'd like to bring Jesus into this as well, because we were asked a really good question, and I'd appreciate actually hearing from both of you. The answer is, it was one of the things we were going to talk about anyway, which is, what differentiates a Tier 4 facility in your view? And of course, I know it's all a matter of details, but at a high level, what differentiates a Tier 4 facility from a Tier 3 facility? Angus, why don't you take that first?
Okay, well, I think it's a really good question. So Tier 4 is something special, I would say, overall. I mean, I think as an auditor or as somebody who understands and has visited a lot of teleports, either as a customer or as a manager in the industry, whatever, you would know when you walk through the door to a certain extent whether it's a Tier 4 or not, without even digging into the detail. There's a certain air that a highly proficient teleport would have. That doesn't mean that you don't need to dig into the detail. Obviously, you do. I would say that the capability of a Tier 4 teleport needs to be absolutely there. So in terms of frequency, clearance, very little frequency restriction, very good view of the geostationary arc. The infrastructure would need to be absolutely there with full redundancy. You'd probably have a backup teleport backing up, at least the capability to back up the services at the teleport being audited. When you got onto the processes, you'd find that there's a real culture of continuous service improvement where the management and the teams really take the opportunity, if there is an issue, if there is an incident, that they actually use that as a learning point. So that continuous service improvement, you would need to have that in bucketfuls as a Tier 4 operator. So because the questionnaire covers 16 different areas, 200 questions, I think it's really important that a Tier 4 teleport would need to be good in all those areas. It wouldn't be sufficient to be good in half of those areas. I think from a balanced scorecard perspective, you'd need to see excellence in all those areas. Yes, there'd be areas for improvement, but you'd have excellence, you'd have high scores in each of the areas, really. So that would be my perspective, Robert.
Well, we certainly, when we designed the questionnaire and did the scoring, we had a lot of discussions around the fact that Tier 4 should be they're wonderful and they should be rare. Jesus, having helped make one of these things, what's your view?
Yes, for me, I totally agree with Angus. In our case, the big point we can have is that as teleport operator, we are able to manage for our capacity. For example, if we have problems with our operations, we can involve our SEC. We can look at the satellite because we are owning the capacity. But it is, I think, to be a Tier 4, any teleport can do it. Not only teleports owned by teleport operators. One of the points, for example, that one teleport not managing satellites can do to get to a Tier 4 is to invest in redundancy. I think, for example, to have a very high level of redundancy for all the services, not only for the RF, for the connectivity as well, for the modulation, for all the blocks in the transmission chain is very important. So I would say that redundancy is one of the most important points for getting this Tier 4.
I'm sorry, that was redundancy, right? Okay, yeah. It took me a second to understand that. I got it. So you talk about redundancy, yes, absolutely. Of huge importance.
Exactly, yeah.
Exactly. Let's go to that same question. Another listener asks, in audits, are there common issues identified during audits, and if so, what are the top 3s? And I'd like to kind of expand that a little bit, because I think when we're talking about issues, what we're really talking about is what are the causes of service problems, right? What is it that we're trying to the most common reasons why we have service problems, and where do you see those? Jesus, you've obviously dealt with this a lot. What are the most common service common causes of service problems that you see in teleports?
Yeah, most of the times the most common problems are related to procedures, are related to miscommunication, misunderstanding. Of course, there are human errors as well, but I think I would remark problems with the procedures because when a teleport has not defined strict procedures to follow for most of the events that can handle, the problems will be easy there. I think that the procedures, as we talked before, is something very important. It's something that sometimes we leave for the end. We implement solutions, we implement services, and after we leave always to put in place the procedure of support, to put in place the procedure of maintenance, to put in place all the activities. For me, I think the documentation of all the tasks is very important. It's very important to avoid problems.
Sure. As I like to say, I usually go into control rooms when all the lights are green and everyone looks relaxed, but I know that there's also those other days when it's not like that. Angus, what do you think in terms of the causes of the primary weaknesses, if you will, that cause service quality problems?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jesus. I think operational processes are absolutely key. I think there's other areas as well, which just, again, depending on the teleport and depending on the local conditions. So one of the things that some people would say is that actually infrastructure issues are one of the biggest problems, and that's because they probably stick in people's minds when they do happen. If you have a big power outage, or you have a lot of problems with cooling, or something that affects multiple services, then it's going to stick in people's minds, and of course that causes a lot of challenges for teleports, and it's quite expensive to fix. So I would say that's one class of service problems you can have, which are particularly difficult, for customers, and B, obviously for the teleport operators to fix. I would say that other areas where I've seen issues other than the processes are around the monitoring tools. So if the teleport doesn't have the right monitoring tools in place, then the operators can have a big job in trying to find out what's going on with the network and the services. So if they're not looking, for example, at the final point of handoff of the service to a partner or into the customer, or in the direct-to-home network to viewers, then I think there can be real issues with understanding if the service is on or off, or whether it is actually operating correctly or not, with subtitles and that kind of thing. So I've seen shortcuts taken with monitoring, which doesn't help teleports deliver good service, and I think that might not be the cause of obviously the root cause of service issues, but it actually exacerbates any issues that you do have if you don't know what's going on with your services. And then I would say that the other cause would be a lack of testing. Again, maybe not a root cause, because it could be that the system's not been implemented properly, but when you're putting a new service into operation, it's so important to test the system and the services before it actually goes live. And without those tests, without the switching tests, the switchover tests, and that kind of thing, then you're storing up problems for the future, in that if there is an issue with one chain, it won't switch over to the second chain. So I think there is a host of potential service problems depending on the teleport and depending on the services and the platforms they're operating, but those are probably the key ones for me.
Interesting. Neither of you answered that question the way I expected. I think it's fascinating. You both emphasized basically what are all human factors. How do we help the people do their jobs properly, which is of course what procedures are for. That's so interesting. Another question came in asking about information security. Of course, information security is top of mind for us all these days, because there seems to be so little of it in the online world. The specific question was, are we following the NIST framework guidelines, the Guidelines for Communication Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council? I have to say, I'm ashamed to say, I can't answer that question. Our information security questions are, I think, somewhat more general than that, but they're fairly thorough. Angus, do you have having just looked through the whole questionnaire, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I think the information security questions are quite high level. They're not to the level that you would expect for ISO 27001, I don't think. But that's okay, because this is not, if this was all about information security, then the audit would be a lot longer and be penetration tests and that kind of thing going on. So I think it's proportionate. So the questions that we ask and the probing that we do in information security is proportionate. But that doesn't mean that we can't, obviously, in future iterations of the survey, we couldn't look into going into more detail in that area, because it is increasingly more worrisome for everybody.
It is indeed, and we'll probably, I mean, one of the things that's been discussed at our end at the board level is just, are there specific modules or other services that should be related? Speaking of which, there's a question from our listeners concerning the issues of certification. The question was, do you see operator training and certification along the lines of, for instance, what the Global VSAT Forum does? Is that a necessary part of WTA certification? And great question. I can actually answer it. We set out not to certify people, but to certify facilities and procedures. But we are, as a next stage, going to begin exploring working with GVF and their operations SATPROF to see if we can work with some of their existing material and bulk it up and actually produce a teleport technical certification for the people working at it. So that's a future project, but it's certainly something on our mind, so thank you for raising that. I have a question which I think is specific kind of to Eutelsat versus other facilities. Obviously, video has its own requirements that are not necessarily standard to all teleports. So what are how much of a difference is there, again, from both of you, if you think about it, between trying to certify and understand a video operation, in Eutelsat, of course, primarily video services, versus a data-centric, internet, telephony, whatever it might be, kind of operation, a maritime or oil and gas kind of operation? What are the differences between those facilities that are relevant to the audit?
Well, from my point of view, the difference is the expertise of the staff. The expertise of the staff, because there are two worlds that are quite different. One teleport can do both activities, but you see very well when one teleport is very, very expert in video and one is very, very expert in data, because there are constraints that are different. For example, with the video, everything the support must be immediate. You cannot go on black for 2 seconds for one customer that is broadcasting live. In the constraints between the world of the data and the world of the video are quite different. So for me, the most important thing, I think, the strongest point that one teleport can have related video or data are the people. The people and indeed the experience.
Sure. I mean, I know we have specific questions in our questionnaire which relate to those two different worlds, but I think that's a great point. Angus, what do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the expertise will be very different. I think also the monitoring tools and the service management tools, and obviously the system management tools will be very different with different platforms. And with the VSAT hub, you're going to have a lot of remote terminals to manage as well. A lot more complexity than the DTH network from that perspective. But yes, you can maybe have shorter outages and not be noticed, whereas obviously with video transmission, you're going to notice every second that's out. So I think also with broadcast facilities, you're probably more likely to have other areas, other service areas like playout coming into play, which obviously isn't covered by the audit, but is something that you take into account, obviously, if you're auditing a teleport with playout facilities as well. So I think it's subtly different. I think fundamentally it comes back to the same thing, though, which is you've got your infrastructure, you've got your platforms, you've got your procedures and your monitoring tools, and you're running a facility that's doing a job, and it's really assessing how well it's doing that job. But yeah, you do need to take into account the individual types of services that are being run from the teleport for the audit, certainly.
Thank you. A couple of specific questions about the certification process itself that I just want to address. One is, the question is there some documentation on how to go about getting a certification? And the answer is certainly yes. If you go to worldteleport.org/certification, you'll end up on the certification pages, and there you can see what our standards are. There's summaries of the things that we look at under standards. There are outline of the procedure for becoming certified. You can also, if you're ready to begin, you can actually request a copy of the questionnaire, and there you will see all the detail you could possibly ask for about what we consider important to becoming a certified teleport. And so when we are standing by to provide personal assistance with that process at any time. So please feel free to reach out to worldteleport.org. Go to our contacts page if you don't, or our certification page, and log your request. Do either of you have any sort of points that we didn't get to? I was going to ask you, Angus, about the sort of most important things that you look for during an audit, but I thought you did a good job of talking about that anyway. But any other sort of last thoughts you want to share with us about the certification process, why it matters, what perhaps surprising things you learned from it?
Yeah, thank you. So this process is a very, very good process for teleports. I mean, in the years that I ran teleports, we didn't have anything like this externally that was a objective benchmark. And I think to have the opportunity to self-audit and then have an auditor come in who's got the right experience to be able to cover all those 16 areas is quite useful for the teleport if they want to improve. And as I said before, I think every teleport can improve, even the tier 4s. There's always areas to improve. So I would encourage teleports to have a look at this and get on board. I think even if it's an internally driven project to start with, I think it's invaluable because it can make the business much more successful. It can make your customers much happier and come back for more and recommend you to other customers, and it can, you know, be a much better place to work if you're running really good services for all the employees and all the teams. It can be a much better place to work if it's a successful, well-managed teleport. So I would encourage people to take part in this. Thank you, Robert.
Certainly. Jesus, the last word to you.
Sure.
Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with us about the value of certification, about what perhaps you learned from the process that you didn't expect to learn?
Well, in general terms, I could strongly recommend to all teleports as well, as the same as Angus indicated, to go through the certification because it is a very extensive process, and I am sure that they will take advantage not only of for the WTA feedback on the report, but also through the rest of the process, all the analysis, all the meetings you need to do to get all the information on this first customer for in questionnaire. And I think the teleports will take advantage of the self-awareness that could take from this whole process. So indeed, I think it is something very recommendable because I am sure that quality in the operations will bring in the end business.
Well, exactly. I think that's a good note to leave it on. That's exactly why we set out to do this, because we think that quality in operations will bring business, and increasingly teleport operators are going to be asked for this certification going forward. So I want to thank very, very much Jesus Mendez-Sembredo from Eutelsat and Angus Blackwood from HawkCX for sharing their views with us and their experience. It's been a very instructive hour to me. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to having you at our next WTA webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.